The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the dusty ranch house, and Miriam Hamilton pressed her trembling hand against the worn leather seat, steeling herself for what lay ahead. She had traveled 17 days from Boston to reach this God-forsaken corner of New Mexico territory, just outside the small settlement of Aztec, and every mile had carried her further from everything familiar and deeper into the unknown. The year was 1883, and the West was still raw and untamed, a place where women like her were bought and sold through newspaper advertisements as casually as cattle at auction. Miriam was 22 years old, a spinster by Boston standards, orphaned and penniless after her father's death 6 months prior. His debts had swallowed everything, leaving her with two choices: accept the questionable charity of distant cousins who made clear she would be little more than an unpaid servant, or answer one of the matrimonial advertisements that filled the back pages of newspapers. She had chosen the latter, corresponding with a ranch owner named Marcus Reid, who claimed to need a wife to help manage his property. His letters had been brief, practical, void of sentiment. He needed someone capable and strong. She needed security and a roof over her head. It seemed a fair exchange, though Miriam harbored no illusions about love or romance. She expected to be a workhorse, a housekeeper with marital obligations, nothing more. The stories she had heard about mail-order brides painted grim pictures of isolation, hard labor, and husbands who viewed their purchased wives as property rather than people. The driver opened the door and helped her down, and Miriam found herself standing in the blazing afternoon sun, her dark traveling dress already suffocating in the New Mexico heat. She was tall for a woman, with strong shoulders earned from years of helping her father in his failing bookshop, and brown hair she kept pinned severely back. Her face was what people politely called handsome rather than pretty, with a firm jaw and intelligent gray eyes that had learned to hide her feelings behind a careful mask. The ranch house before her was larger than she expected, a solid structure of adobe and timber with a wide covered porch. Corrals stretched out to the left, holding several horses that lifted their heads at the commotion. To the right stood a barn and various outbuildings. Everything looked well-maintained, prosperous even, which surprised her. She had expected something more desperate, more run down. Men who sent for wives from newspaper advertisements were usually those who could not attract them any other way. The front door opened, and a man stepped onto the porch. Miriam's breath caught despite herself. Marcus Reid was not what she had imagined. She had pictured someone old, grizzled, possibly cruel-looking. The man walking toward her was perhaps 30 years old, tall and lean with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that brushed his collar. He wore simple ranch clothes, boots dusty from work, but he carried himself with a quiet confidence that made her instinctively straighten her spine. His face was weathered from outdoor life but handsome in a rugged way, with strong features and eyes so deeply blue they seemed startling against his tanned skin. Those eyes studied her carefully as he approached, and Miriam braced herself for disappointment or criticism. She knew she was not the delicate, pretty thing men typically wanted. Marcus stopped a respectful distance away and removed his hat. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, and Miriam felt her cheeks warming under his scrutiny. She lifted her chin, refusing to appear weak or apologetic for her appearance. Then he smiled, and it transformed his entire face, reaching those blue eyes with genuine warmth. "Miss Hamilton," he said, his voice a deep, pleasant drawl. "You made it safely. I am glad." "Mr. Reid," she replied, keeping her voice steady and formal. He glanced at the driver who was unloading her trunk, then back at her. "You must be exhausted from the journey. Hungry and thirsty too, I imagine. He took a step closer, extending his hand not to shake hers, but gesturing toward the house with an openness that surprised her. "Welcome home, my equal." The words struck her like a physical blow. My equal. Not my wife, not my housekeeper, not my property. My equal. Miriam stared at him, searching for mockery or hidden meaning, but his expression remained open and sincere. "I do not understand," she said carefully. Marcus's smile softened. "I reckon my letters were not as clear as they should have been. I did not send for a servant, Miss Hamilton. I sent for a partner. This ranch is big enough for two people to run together, and I believe in straight dealing. You will have equal say in how things are managed and equal share in what we build. That was always my intention." "But the advertisement said you needed a wife," Miriam said, confusion making her blunt. "I do," Marcus replied, "but I have no use for a slave or a subordinate. I need someone who can stand beside me, not behind me, someone with a mind of her own and the spine to speak it." His blue eyes held hers steadily. "From your letters, I believed you might be that person. Was I wrong?" Miriam felt something crack inside her chest, some defensive wall she had built around her expectations. "I do not know what to say." "Say you will come inside and have some cold water and food," Marcus said gently. "Say you will give this place and me a fair chance before you decide anything permanent. The circuit judge will not be through Aztec for another 3 weeks regardless. That gives us time to see if we suit each other." "You mean you have not arranged for us to marry immediately?" Miriam asked. "Not unless you want to," Marcus said. "I thought you might appreciate time to settle in, see how you feel about the place and about me. If you decide I misrepresented things or you just cannot stomach the life out here, I will pay your passage back to Boston. No questions asked and no obligations owed." It was so far from what she had expected that Miriam felt dizzy. "Why would you do that?" Marcus replaced his hat, shading his eyes from the brutal sun. "Because I remember what it feels like to be cornered with no good choices. My parents died when I was 16, and I spent 2 years working for a rancher who treated his horses better than his hands. When I finally saved enough to buy this land, I swore I would never make another person feel powerless or trapped." He gestured toward the house again. "Come on. We can talk more inside where it is cooler." Miriam nodded, not trusting her voice, and let him guide her toward the porch. The driver had deposited her trunk near the steps and was already climbing back onto the stagecoach. Marcus called out his thanks, and a few coins flashed in the sunlight as payment for the extra trouble. The interior of the house was dim and blessedly cool after the harsh sunlight. Miriam's eyes adjusted slowly, revealing a large main room with a stone fireplace, comfortable furniture that had clearly been built for function rather than fashion. And surprisingly, shelves of books lining one entire wall. Her feet carried her toward those shelves involuntarily, her fingers itching to touch the spines. "You like books," Marcus observed from behind her. It was a statement, not a question. "My father owned a bookshop," Miriam said softly, tracing the titles with her eyes. She saw volumes on ranching and animal husbandry, but also poetry, novels, history, philosophy. "I grew up surrounded by them." "Then those are yours as much as mine now," Marcus said. "I will admit I do not get as much time to read as I would like during busy seasons, but winter evenings get long out here. It helps to have something to occupy the mind." Miriam turned to face him. "Mr. Reid, I do not understand why you are being so kind to me." "Marcus," he corrected gently. "And I am not being kind, Miss Hamilton. I am being practical. A partnership only works if both people are respected and valued. Otherwise, you get resentment, anger, people working against each other instead of together." He moved to a small kitchen area and poured water from a clay pitcher into a glass. "Here, drink this. You look like the heat is getting to you." She accepted the glass gratefully, the cool water soothing her parched throat. "You may call me Miriam if we are to dispense with formalities." "Miriam," Marcus repeated, as if testing how it felt in his mouth. "It suits you. Strong name for what I suspect is a strong woman." "I worked in my father's shop from the time I was 12, Miriam said. "I can read and write and do figures. I kept his books and managed his inventory. I am not afraid of hard work, but I have no experience with ranching or cooking over an open fire or any of the things you probably need." "Do you know how to learn?" Marcus asked. "Yes." "Then we will start there." He leaned against the wooden counter, crossing his arms in a way that seemed relaxed rather than defensive. "I have a woman named Rosa who comes up from Aztec twice a week to help with the heavy cleaning and laundry. She is teaching me proper cooking since I have been living on burned beans and tough beef for too long. I reckon she could teach you too, if you are willing. As for ranching, I will show you everything you need to know about the animals and the land. It is not complicated, just different from city life." "You have thought about this considerably," Miriam observed. "I have had months to think about it," Marcus admitted. "Since I first decided to place that advertisement, I lost my wife 3 years ago." The statement hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken grief. Miriam set down her glass carefully. "I am sorry for your loss." "Her name was Catherine," Marcus said quietly. "We grew up together, married when we were both 19. She took fever one winter and did not recover. For a long time after, I did not think I wanted anyone else here. This place felt like it was still half hers, and bringing in another woman seemed like a betrayal." "What changed?" Miriam asked softly. Marcus was quiet for a moment, staring out the window toward the corrals. "I realized Catherine would not have wanted me to be alone forever. She was practical about things like that. And I understood that I was not really looking for someone to replace her, because that is impossible. I was looking for someone to start something new with, something different but equally valuable." He turned back to face Miriam. "Your letters showed education and clear thinking. You did not write flowery nonsense about love or romance. You were honest about your situation and what you needed. That kind of honesty is rare and worth more than gold out here." Miriam felt heat in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the New Mexico sun. "My circumstances did not allow for romantic illusions, Mr. Reid." "Marcus," she corrected herself. "I needed security and you needed help. I thought it was a simple exchange." "It can be that," Marcus agreed. "Or it can become something more, given time and patience. I am not expecting you to love me, Miriam, but I am hoping we might become friends at least and partners in truth. The rest, if it happens, will happen naturally or not at all." It was perhaps the most unusual courtship speech any woman had ever received, and yet it resonated with Miriam more deeply than any poetry or flowery declaration could have. This was a man offering her respect, autonomy, and honest dealing. In her experience, those were far rarer than protestations of love. "I think I would like to see the rest of the house," she said, "and perhaps lie down for a while. The journey was very long." "Of course." Marcus straightened and gestured toward a hallway. "There are 2 bedrooms. The larger one was mine and Catherine's. I have been sleeping in the smaller one since she passed. You should take the larger room. It has better light and more space for your things." "I cannot take your room," Miriam protested. "It is not my room anymore," Marcus said simply. "I moved my things out months ago. It is just a room now, waiting for someone to make it theirs again." He walked down the hallway and opened a door, revealing a spacious bedroom with a large bed, a wardrobe, a washstand with basin and pitcher, and a window overlooking the mountains in the distance. The room was clean but impersonal, stripped of whatever feminine touches Catherine had given it. Miriam could see it was a blank canvas, waiting for someone to bring it back to life. "I will bring your trunk in," Marcus said. "You rest as long as you need. I have evening chores to handle in the barn, but I will be back to make supper around sunset. Rosa left us a pot of stew that just needs heating, so you do not have to worry about my cooking tonight." "Thank you," Miriam said, and meant it more deeply than those simple words could convey. Marcus nodded and left her alone. A few minutes later, she heard him hefting her trunk, his footsteps approaching, and then the solid thump as he set it down just inside her doorway. He did not intrude further, just called out, "Sleep well," before his footsteps retreated toward the front door. Miriam closed the bedroom door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. She had arrived expecting cruelty, or at best indifference. She had steeled herself to be useful, to earn her keep through backbreaking work and submission to a stranger's demands. Instead, she had been welcomed as an equal by a man who seemed to genuinely mean what he said. It was terrifying in its unexpectedness. She moved to the window and looked out at the landscape beyond. The mountains rose purple and majestic against the brilliant blue sky. Closer in, the land rolled in shades of gold and brown, dotted with hardy scrub brush and the occasional twisted tree. It was beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way that matched something in her own soul. Miriam had spent her whole life in Boston, surrounded by brick buildings and crowds of people. She had never seen horizons this vast, never experienced silence this complete. The openness of it called to something hungry inside her, some part of herself she had not known existed until this moment. She unpacked a few essential items from her trunk, hanging 2 dresses in the wardrobe and setting her brush and hand mirror on the washstand. Then she removed her traveling dress, grateful to be free of its confining weight, and lay down on the bed in her chemise and petticoat. The mattress was surprisingly comfortable, stuffed with something softer than straw. Miriam closed her eyes, intending to rest for just a few minutes, but exhaustion pulled her down into deep, dreamless sleep. When she woke, the light slanting through the window had turned golden with approaching sunset. Miriam sat up, disoriented for a moment before memory flooded back. She was in New Mexico, in Marcus Reid's house, and everything was different from what she had expected. She washed her face in the basin, pinned her hair back up properly, and put her dress back on before venturing out into the main room. The house was quiet, but she could smell something savory and rich that made her stomach growl. Following her nose to the kitchen area, she found a pot of stew simmering over low coals in the hearth, tended but with no sign of Marcus. The front door stood open to catch the cooling evening air, and Miriam walked to it, looking out across the porch to the corrals beyond. She spotted Marcus immediately, working with one of the horses. The animal was clearly young, skittish, and uncertain, but Marcus handled it with patient gentleness that was beautiful to watch. His voice carried across the distance, low and soothing, a constant murmur of encouragement and reassurance. Miriam found herself drawn outside, walking slowly so as not to startle the horse. Marcus glanced her way and his face brightened, but he did not stop what he was doing. The horse was wearing a saddle now, and Marcus was clearly preparing to mount for the first time. "This is Copper," Marcus said as Miriam reached the corral fence. "I have been working with him for 3 months, getting him used to the saddle and bridle. Today feels like the right day to see if he will accept a rider." "Is it dangerous?" Miriam asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "Can be," Marcus admitted, "but I do not think Copper has much buck in him. He is more curious than aggressive." As if to prove the point, the young horse stretched his nose toward Miriam, nostrils flaring as he took in her unfamiliar scent. "May I touch him?" Miriam asked. Sure, but move slow and let him come to you. Miriam held still, her hand extended palm down over the fence rail. Copper considered for a moment, then stepped closer and blew warm air across her fingers before allowing his velvety nose to brush against her palm. Something melted in Miriam's chest at the contact, the simple trust the animal offered. He likes you, Marcus observed. That is a good sign. Horses are better judges of character than most people. What does it mean if I like him back? Miriam asked, stroking the white blaze down Copper's face. It means you might have the makings of a rancher in you, Marcus said warmly. A person who does not care for horses will have a hard time out here. They are not just transportation, they are partners in the work. Marcus moved with sudden fluid grace, swinging himself up into the saddle. Copper tensed, his muscles bunching, and for a moment Miriam held her breath. Then the horse settled, turning his head to look back at his rider with what seemed like puzzlement rather than fear. Good boy, Marcus murmured, rubbing the horse's neck. You are doing so well, Copper. Such a smart, brave boy. He kept up the steady stream of praise as he asked the horse to walk, then turn, then stop. Copper obeyed each command with only minor confusion, clearly wanting to please. After perhaps 10 minutes, Marcus dismounted and rewarded the horse with something from his pocket, some treat that Copper lipped up eagerly. That was amazing, Miriam said as Marcus led the horse toward her. He trusted you completely. Trust is earned, not demanded, Marcus said. With horses or people. I spent months just being present with him, letting him learn my smell and voice, showing him I would not hurt him. Today was just the natural result of all that patient work. He gave her a meaningful look. It is a lesson that applies to most things worth having. Miriam understood he was talking about more than horses, and she felt warmth spread through her chest. I have never been on a horse, she admitted. In Boston, we walked or took carriages. Would you like to learn? Marcus asked. Yes, Miriam said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Then we will start tomorrow with one of the older, gentler mares. But tonight, we should eat before Rosa's stew gets any colder. He began removing Copper's tack with practiced efficiency, and Miriam watched, memorizing each step. The bridle came off first, then the saddle, revealing darker patches in the horse's coat where leather had rested. Marcus rubbed those areas with his hands, working out any discomfort before turning Copper loose in the corral with the other horses. They walked back to the house together in the cooling dusk, and Miriam found the silence between them comfortable rather than awkward. Marcus washed up at a basin on the porch, scrubbing the dust and horse smell from his hands and face, then held the door for her as they went inside. The stew was rich with beef, potatoes, and vegetables Miriam did not recognize, flavored with spices that were foreign but delicious. They ate at a simple wooden table, and Marcus told her about the ranch, the challenges of water in this dry country, the neighbors scattered at distances that would seem impossible to a city dweller, the seasonal rhythms of the work. You have cattle? Miriam asked, soaking up the last of her stew with a piece of bread. About 200 head right now, Marcus said. Not a huge operation, but enough to provide steady income. I also break and train horses, which is more profitable but less predictable. Some years I sell a dozen, some years only 3 or 4, depending on who needs what. And you manage all this alone. I have a hand named Joseph who helps with the heavy work during busy seasons, Marcus said. He is Navajo, been working with me for 2 years. Good man, knows horses better than anyone I have met. You will likely meet him tomorrow. He comes by most mornings to see what needs doing. Does he live nearby? Miriam asked. He has a place about 5 miles north, closer to his family, Marcus explained. The reservation is not far from here. There is often tension between the Navajo people and the white ranchers, suspicion on both sides, but Joseph and I have managed to build mutual respect. I pay him fair wages in cash, not trade goods, and I do not cheat him. He works hard and teaches me about this land, which his people have known far longer than mine. Miriam heard the respect in Marcus's voice and filed it away as another piece of information about this man who continued to surprise her. In Boston, she had heard Native people spoken of as savages and obstacles to progress. Marcus spoke of them as neighbors and teachers. After supper, they washed the dishes together, falling into an easy rhythm of his washing and her drying. The domesticity of it felt strange and intimate at once. Miriam kept expecting Marcus to say or do something that would shatter this unexpected peace, reveal some darker nature or hidden expectation. But he simply finished the dishes, banked the fire for the night, and bid her a polite good night before retreating to his smaller bedroom. Miriam lay awake in the larger bedroom for a long time, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the New Mexico night. Coyotes sang in the distance, their yips and howls both eerie and beautiful. The wind whispered around the house's corners. And beneath it all, silence deeper than any she had known in the city. She had been here less than 12 hours, and already everything she thought she knew about her future had been upended. Marcus Reid was not the harsh master she had expected, and this ranch was not the prison she had imagined. For the first time since her father's death, Miriam felt something that might have been hope stirring in her chest. Sleep came eventually, and with it dreams of wide horizons and horses running free under endless sky. Morning arrived with brilliant sunlight streaming through her window and the sound of activity outside. Miriam rose quickly, splashing cold water on her face and dressing in her simplest day dress. She emerged from her bedroom to find Marcus already up, coffee brewing over the rekindled fire. "Morning," he said with a smile. "I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in months," Miriam admitted. "The quiet here is remarkable." "It takes some getting used to if you are from the city," Marcus agreed. He poured her a cup of coffee, strong and black. "Joseph should be here soon. I thought today you might like to learn about the animals and how we manage water. Nothing too strenuous since you are still recovering from your journey." "I am stronger than I look," Miriam said. "I do not doubt it," Marcus replied. "But there is no rush. We have time." They had finished a simple breakfast of bread and eggs when the sound of hoofbeats announced Joseph's arrival. Miriam followed Marcus outside to meet the Navajo man, trying not to show nervousness. Joseph was perhaps Marcus's age, with long dark hair tied back and observant brown eyes that assessed her with the same careful attention Marcus had shown Copper yesterday. "Joseph, this is Miriam Hamilton," Marcus said. "Miriam, Joseph Natani. He is the one who keeps this ranch actually running while I fumble around pretending to know what I am doing." Joseph's stern face cracked into a slight smile at that. "Marcus is too modest. He learns quickly." He turned to Miriam and gave a small nod of greeting. "Welcome." "You are the woman from Boston." "Yes," Miriam said. "I arrived yesterday." "Long journey," Joseph observed. "My wife Alina made that trip once to visit the mission school. She said it took many weeks and everything was strange." "That is accurate," Miriam agreed. "I am finding everything here very different from what I knew." "Different can be good," Joseph said. He glanced at Marcus. "The water trough in the far pasture needs repair. I saw it yesterday when I was checking fences." "I will get tools," Marcus said. "Miriam, you are welcome to come with us or stay here and explore the house and nearby buildings. Whatever you prefer." "I would like to come," Miriam said immediately. She had not traveled all this way to hide inside. Marcus's expression showed approval, and they gathered tools from the barn before riding out. Marcus saddled an older mare named Bess for Miriam, showing her how to mount and hold the reins. The horse was placid and patient, tolerating Miriam's clumsy inexperience with good grace. The ride to the far pasture took nearly an hour, and by the end, Miriam's legs ached from the unfamiliar position, but she refused to complain. The landscape rolled past in shades of gold and brown, interrupted by brilliant splashes of wildflowers in purple and red. The sky overhead was so intensely blue it almost hurt to look at, unmarred by even a wisp of cloud. The water trough was a long wooden construction fed by a spring that bubbled up from underground. One side had cracked, letting precious water leak away into the thirsty soil. Marcus and Joseph set to work repairing it with practiced efficiency, while Miriam watched and asked questions about how the water system worked. "Water is everything out here," Marcus explained as he worked. "Without it, the land cannot support cattle or horses. This spring is why I was able to buy this property at all. The previous owner did not understand its value and sold cheap. My people have always known where the water is," Joseph added quietly. "The land tells you if you know how to listen." "Will you teach me?" Miriam asked him. Joseph looked up from his work, surprise flickering across his face. "You want to learn Navajo ways?" "I want to learn how to survive here," Miriam said honestly. "And thrive if possible. Marcus said your people have known this land much longer than his. It seems foolish to ignore that knowledge." Something shifted in Joseph's expression, a warming that had not been there before. "You are not what I expected," he said. "I am not what I expected either," Miriam admitted, which made both men laugh. They finished the repair and rode back as the sun climbed higher, heat building toward the fierce intensity of afternoon. By the time they returned to the ranch house, Miriam was exhausted, sunburned despite her bonnet, and completely exhilarated. She had spent the morning doing real work, learning practical skills, and both men had treated her as a capable participant rather than a delicate observer. Marcus showed her how to unsaddle Bess and rub her down properly, explaining the importance of caring for the horse after a ride. The work was harder than it looked, and Miriam's arms trembled by the time she finished, but she felt proud of herself in a way she never had working in her father's bookshop. Joseph left after the horses were settled, heading to check on some cattle in another section of the ranch. Marcus and Miriam retreated inside to escape the worst of the afternoon heat, and Marcus pulled down a book from his shelves. "I thought you might like this," he said, handing her a volume. "It is about ranching in the Southwest, written by a woman who homesteaded in Arizona Territory. Practical information mixed with personal observations." Miriam accepted the book gratefully, running her hand over the cover. "You are thoughtful," she said softly. "I want you to feel at home here," Marcus replied. "I know it is all strange now, but I hope in time it will feel natural." Over the following days, they fell into a rhythm. Each morning, Miriam rose early and helped Marcus with the livestock, learning to recognize each horse and cow by sight, understanding their individual personalities and needs. Joseph came by daily, and his initial wariness of Miriam gradually transformed into respect as she proved willing to learn and unafraid of hard work. Rosa arrived on her scheduled day, a plump woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a quick laugh. She spoke a mixture of Spanish and English, and seemed delighted to have another woman at the ranch. She immediately took Miriam under her wing, teaching her how to make tortillas, how to cook beans so they were tender rather than hard, how to coax flavor from limited ingredients. "Marcus is good man," Rosa told Miriam in her accented English as they worked together over the fire. "But he has been sad, lonely. I'm glad you are here." "I am still deciding if I will stay," Miriam said, though even as she spoke the words, she knew they were becoming less true each day. "You will stay," Rosa said confidently. "I see how you look at him, and how he looks at you is good." Miriam felt her cheeks heat. "He is kind to me." "Kind, yes, but also something more," Rosa said with a knowing smile. "Give it time. Good things grow slow." Marcus continued to surprise her with small considerations. He noticed she preferred tea to coffee in the evenings and acquired some for her. When she mentioned missing books in her letters that she had been forced to sell with her father's shop, he quietly ordered copies from a catalog. He taught her to ride properly, patient with her mistakes and generous with his praise for her progress. 2 weeks after her arrival, Marcus took her into Aztec for supplies. The town was small, just a handful of buildings clustered around a central plaza, but it represented civilization in this wild country. People stared at Miriam with open curiosity, and she heard whispers following them through the general store. "They are wondering about you," Marcus said quietly as they selected supplies. "Wondering if we are married yet." "What do you tell them?" Miriam asked. "The truth," Marcus said, "that you are deciding if this life suits you and that I am hoping it does." The storekeeper, a balding man named Silas, was more direct. "So this is the mail-order bride," he said loudly enough for half the store to hear. "Bit plain, is she not, Marcus? I thought you would want something prettier to look at." Miriam felt her face flame with humiliation, but before she could respond, Marcus's voice cut through the store like a whip. "You will apologize to Miss Hamilton immediately, or you will find I will take my considerable business elsewhere." The store went silent. Silas's face worked through several expressions before settling on sullen acceptance. "No offense meant, miss, but plenty given," Marcus said coldly. He turned to Miriam. "We will get supplies in Santa Fe instead. The ride is longer, but the company is better." He began to walk out, and Miriam followed, her heart pounding. Behind them, she heard Silas calling out an apology, more sincere this time, and Marcus stopped. "What do you think?" he asked Miriam quietly. "Your opinion matters here." Miriam considered. She could hear the genuine regret in Silas's voice now, and she understood that in a small town like this, they could not afford to make enemies unnecessarily. But she also understood Marcus had just publicly declared her worthy of respect, which mattered more than the storekeeper's rudeness. "I think everyone deserves a second chance," she said, "but not a third." Marcus's face broke into a wide smile. "Agreed." He turned back to Silas. "You heard the lady. We will continue our business here, but only because Miss Hamilton is more generous than you deserve." They completed their purchases in subdued quiet, Silas falling over himself to be helpful. As they loaded supplies into the wagon, Miriam became aware of a woman watching them from across the street. She was perhaps 50, well-dressed by frontier standards, with steel gray hair and an assessing gaze. "That is Mrs. Anderson," Marcus said, following Miriam's look. "She runs the boarding house and considers herself the moral authority of Aztec. She will likely want to meet you properly." As if summoned, Mrs. Anderson crossed the street toward them. Her expression was stern but not unkind. "Marcus Reid," she said formally. "Are you going to introduce me to your guest, Mrs. Anderson? May I present Miss Miriam Hamilton of Boston," Marcus said. "Miriam, Mrs. Eliza Anderson." "A pleasure," Miriam said, offering her hand. Mrs. Anderson shook it firmly, her eyes never leaving Miriam's face. "You are the mail-order bride everyone is gossiping about." "I am considering becoming Marcus's wife," Miriam said, keeping her voice steady. "We are taking time to know each other first." "Sensible," Mrs. Anderson said with approval. "Too many of these arrangements end in misery because people rush into legal contracts without understanding what they are agreeing to." She glanced at Marcus. "You are treating her properly, I hope." I am treating her as an equal and a guest in my home, Marcus said. As she deserves. Good. Mrs. Anderson returned her attention to Miriam. If you need anything, or if you simply want female company, you are welcome at my boarding house any time. We have a quilting circle that meets every Thursday afternoon. You would be welcome to join us. Thank you, Miriam said, genuinely touched by the offer. I may take you up on that. They parted on good terms, and as Marcus drove the wagon out of town, he glanced at Miriam with amusement. You passed inspection. Was I being tested? Everything is a test in a small town, Marcus said, but you handled yourself well. Mrs. Anderson's approval will go a long way toward making the other women accept you. And do I need their acceptance? Miriam asked. Only if you plan to stay, Marcus said quietly. They rode in silence for a while, the wagon rattling over the rough road. Finally, Miriam said, Marcus, I need to tell you something. I am listening. I did not expect to like it here, Miriam said carefully. I thought I would be miserable, trapped, probably mistreated. I braced myself to endure rather than enjoy. And now, Marcus asked. Now I find myself not wanting to leave, Miriam admitted. You have been kinder than I imagined anyone could be. This place is strange and difficult, but also beautiful in ways I did not know I needed. I feel like I can breathe here, like there is room for me to be myself rather than what other people expect. Marcus pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her fully. I need to tell you something too, he said. I did not expect to feel this way about you. Miriam's breath caught. What way? When I placed that advertisement, I truly was looking for a practical partner, Marcus said. Someone to help run the ranch, share the work and the profits. I told myself I would never feel for anyone what I felt for Catherine, and I did not want to. That kind of love, when you lose it, hurts too much. He paused, his blue eyes searching her face. But these past 2 weeks, getting to know you, watching you tackle everything with such determination and grace, I find myself feeling things I did not expect to feel again. Marcus, Miriam whispered. I am not asking you to return those feelings, he said quickly. I know this is all new and strange for you. I just wanted to be honest. You deserve honesty. Miriam reached out and placed her hand over his where it rested on the wagon seat. I feel it too, she said softly. I did not want to, did not expect to, but I do. When you smile at me, I feel warm inside. When you teach me something new, I want to learn everything you know. When you defended me in the store, I wanted to kiss you right there in front of everyone. Marcus's expression transformed, hope and joy and desire mingling in his eyes. May I kiss you now? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. Yes, Miriam breathed. He leaned toward her slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but Miriam met him halfway. Their lips touched gently at first, a question and an answer. Then Marcus's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb stroking her cheek, and the kiss deepened into something more passionate. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Marcus rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. I did not dare hope, he whispered. Neither did I, Miriam said, but here we are. They sat there for a long moment, holding each other before Marcus straightened and took up the reins again. We should get home, he said, but Miriam, I want you to know that nothing has to change unless you want it to. You still have time to decide and no pressure from me either way. The judge comes through in a week, Miriam said. He does. I think I have decided, Miriam said, unless you have changed your mind. Marcus looked at her with such naked longing that it took her breath away. I have not changed my mind. I want you to stay as my wife and my partner if you are willing. I am willing, Miriam said. More than willing. I want to build a life here with you, Marcus Reid. His smile could have lit the darkness. Then we will see the judge when he comes and make it legal. But Miriam, I need you to understand something. I will never force my attentions on you. Sharing a name does not mean you owe me anything you are not ready to give. We will have separate rooms until you decide otherwise. You are the most unusual man, Miriam said wonderingly. I just believe in treating people right, Marcus said. Especially people I care about. The week before the judge's arrival passed in a blur of preparation and growing anticipation. Miriam worked alongside Marcus every day, their partnership deepening as they learned each other's rhythms and preferences. They talked for hours in the evenings, sharing histories and dreams, discovering surprising compatibilities and laughing over their differences. Rosa was delighted when they told her about the upcoming wedding and insisted on making Miriam a proper dress. Mrs. Anderson appeared at the ranch 2 days later with fabric and 3 other women from town, and they spent an afternoon measuring and cutting and sewing while asking Miriam friendly questions about her life in Boston. Joseph brought his wife Alina to meet Miriam, a quiet woman with kind eyes who spoke better English than her husband. She brought a wedding gift, a beautifully woven blanket in shades of red and brown. "For your marriage bed," Alina said shyly. "It is traditional among my people to give something handmade, made with good thoughts and wishes for happiness." "It is beautiful," Miriam said, running her hands over the intricate pattern. "Thank you so much." "Joseph says you are different from other white women who come here," Alina said. "He says you listen and learn without judgment. That is rare and valuable." "I try," Miriam said. "I know I have much to learn about this place and its people." "You will do well," Alina said with confidence. "Marcus has chosen wisely." The judge arrived on schedule, a jovial man named Hartley who traveled a circuit through the territory performing weddings, settling disputes, and administering justice as needed. He set up in Aztec's small church, and by the time Marcus and Miriam arrived, half the town had turned out to witness the ceremony. Miriam wore the dress Rosa and the women had made, a simple but elegant creation of cream-colored fabric with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Her hair was pinned up with small wildflowers Rosa had gathered that morning. She felt beautiful, perhaps for the first time in her life, not because of the dress, but because of how Marcus looked at her when she walked into the church. He wore his best clothes, dark trousers and a white shirt with a black vest, his hair neatly combed. But it was his expression that stole her breath, the pure joy and love shining from his eyes as she walked toward him. The ceremony was brief and simple. Judge Hartley asked the traditional questions, received their answers, and pronounced them husband and wife with hearty enthusiasm. When Marcus kissed her, the assembled townspeople cheered, and Miriam felt tears of happiness sting her eyes. They celebrated afterward at Mrs. Anderson's boarding house, where the townspeople had organized an impromptu wedding feast. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, and for the first time since her father's death, Miriam felt truly part of a community. As the sun set, and they prepared to ride back to the ranch, Mrs. Anderson pulled Miriam aside. "You did well today," the older woman said. "Marcus is a good man and you are a good match for him, but marriage is work, child. Remember that. It takes patience and compromise and communication. Do not let small grievances become big resentments." "I will remember," Miriam promised. "Thank you for everything today." "Welcome to Aztec," Mrs. Anderson said warmly. "Welcome home." The ride back to the ranch in the gathering dusk felt different now. Miriam was returning not as a guest or a potential bride, but as Marcus's wife, as a full partner in the ranch and their shared life. The knowledge settled over her like Alina's blanket, warm and comforting. At the house, Marcus helped her down from the wagon with exaggerated courtesy that made her laugh. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Carrying my bride across the threshold," he said, sweeping her up into his arms. "It is traditional." "You are full of surprises," Miriam said, wrapping her arms around his neck. He carried her inside and set her down gently in the main room. The fire was laid but not lit, the house dark except for moonlight streaming through the windows. Marcus lit a lamp and warm light pushed back the shadows. "Miriam," he said softly, "I meant what I said before. Nothing has to change tonight unless you want it to. Your room is still yours." "I know," Miriam said. She stepped closer to him, her heart pounding but her decision clear. "But I do not want separate rooms, Marcus. I want to be your wife in truth." His eyes darkened with desire, but he searched her face carefully. "Are you certain? There is no rush." "I am certain," Miriam said. She reached up and cupped his face in her hands. "I love you, Marcus Reid. I did not expect to, but I do. And I want all of what marriage means." Marcus pulled her close, kissing her with a passion that had been restrained until now. When he lifted his head, his breathing was unsteady. "I love you too," he said roughly. "More than I thought possible. You are everything I did not know I needed." He led her to what had been his room, now lit with candles he must have prepared before they left for town. It was a thoughtful touch that made Miriam's heart swell with affection. Everything about Marcus showed consideration and care, and she knew without doubt that she had made the right choice. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a discovery of each other that left them both trembling and complete. Afterward, they lay tangled together under Alina's wedding blanket, talking in soft voices as the night deepened around them. "I was so afraid," Miriam admitted, her head on Marcus's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "When I boarded that stagecoach in Boston, I was convinced I was traveling toward misery." "And now?" Marcus asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Now I know I was traveling toward home," Miriam said. "Toward you, toward the life I was meant to have." "I am grateful every day that you answered my advertisement," Marcus said, "and that you were brave enough to take the risk." "We both took a risk," Miriam pointed out. "You could have gotten someone awful. But I got you instead," Marcus said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I got everything." The months that followed were not without challenges, but they faced each one together. The summer heat was brutal, and Miriam learned what true thirst meant during long days working in the sun. A late summer storm spooked the cattle, and she rode out with Marcus and Joseph to round them up, discovering she had a natural talent for reading the animals' movements. Her riding improved until she could handle any horse on the ranch with confidence. Rosa continued her cooking lessons, and Miriam gradually became capable of producing meals that were not just edible but genuinely good. Marcus never complained about the disasters along the way, eating burned biscuits and oversalted stew with good humor and helpful suggestions. In September, a neighboring rancher tried to divert water from the spring that fed Marcus's property. It was Joseph who discovered the illegal dam, and Marcus who confronted the neighbor with Miriam at his side. The dispute was tense, nearly coming to blows, but Miriam's calm recitation of territorial water law, which she had studied carefully, diffused the situation. The neighbor backed down, and word spread through the district that Marcus Reid's wife was not just decorative but formidable in her own right. As autumn painted the mountains in shades of gold and red, Miriam realized she had not thought about Boston in weeks. Her old life seemed like something that had happened to a different person, a stranger whose desires and fears no longer matched her own. She was not the same woman who had arrived expecting cruelty and finding instead a partnership more equal and loving than she had imagined possible. In late October, Miriam woke feeling queasy, and Rosa took one look at her face before laughing with delight. "You are pregnant," the older woman announced. "I can always tell." Miriam's hand went instinctively to her belly, still flat under her dress. "It is too early to know for certain," she protested. "I am certain," Rosa said smugly. "You will see. By next June there will be a baby." That evening, Miriam told Marcus her suspicion as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. He went very still, his hand freezing where it had been stroking her hair. "A baby," he said, his voice strange. "Possibly," Miriam said, suddenly nervous. "Rosa seems convinced, though I think it is too early to be sure. Are you pleased?" Marcus pulled her into his arms so tightly she squeaked in protest. "Please does not begin to cover it," he said roughly. "Miriam, a child, our child, I never dared hope for such a blessing." "Then you are happy?" Miriam asked, relaxing into his embrace. "I am overwhelmed," Marcus admitted. "Happy and terrified and grateful all at once." "That makes two of us," Miriam said. Over the following weeks, the signs became clearer. Miriam's monthly courses did not come. Her breasts became tender, her sense of smell unnaturally sharp. By December, there was no doubt, and Marcus treated her like spun glass, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work. "I am pregnant, not dying," Miriam protested when he tried to stop her from carrying a bucket of water. "Women have been doing this for thousands of years." "But you are the only woman carrying my child," Marcus said stubbornly. "And I will not risk you or the baby for the sake of some chore I can do myself." They compromised, Miriam continuing the work she loved with the horses, but giving up the heaviest physical labor to Marcus and Joseph. Her body changed, her belly swelling with new life, and Marcus seemed fascinated by each development. He would place his hands on her stomach in the evenings, feeling for the baby's movements, his face soft with wonder. Winter settled over the ranch, bringing cold nights and occasional snow. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other or simply talking. Miriam worked on baby clothes with Rosa's help, learning to knit and sew tiny garments that made the coming child feel more real. Boy or girl? Marcus asked one night as Miriam held up a small gown she had finished. "I do not care," Miriam said honestly, "as long as the baby is healthy." "A girl who looks like you," Marcus said dreamily, "with your gray eyes and stubborn chin." "A boy with your kindness and patience," Miriam countered. "Or a child completely unlike either of us who will surprise us every day," Marcus said, pulling her close. "Any way it happens, we will be blessed." Spring came late that year, but when it arrived it was glorious. The desert bloomed in a riot of wildflowers, and Miriam spent hours walking among them, her hand on her swollen belly, talking to the child who would soon join them. She felt huge and ungainly, but Marcus insisted she had never been more beautiful, and the love in his eyes when he looked at her made her believe it might be true. In early June, as Rosa had predicted, the pains began. Rosa and Alina came to help, sending Marcus and Joseph out of the house with firm instructions to make themselves useful elsewhere. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Miriam was certain she could not continue, but Rosa's steady voice and Alina's cool cloths on her forehead kept her grounded. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Miriam delivered a healthy baby boy. He came into the world squalling his outrage, with a thick thatch of dark hair and lungs that promised he would have no trouble making his needs known. Rosa cleaned him quickly and placed him in Miriam's arms, and the love that flooded through her was so intense it was almost painful. This was her son, hers and Marcus's, a new life they had created together. "He is perfect," she whispered, tracing his tiny features with one finger. "He is indeed," Alina agreed. "Strong and healthy. You did well." Marcus was allowed in finally, his face haggard with worry that transformed into joy when he saw Miriam and the baby both alive and well. He sank onto the bed beside them, his hands shaking as he touched his son's head. "A boy," he said wonderingly. "Our boy." "What should we name him?" Miriam asked. They had discussed names during the long winter months but had never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at his son's face, Marcus said, "Matthew, if that suits you. It was my father's name." "Matthew Reid," Miriam tested. "I like it." "Matthew Hamilton Reid. Both our families," Marcus agreed. "Old and new together." Matthew proved to be a demanding infant, hungry and vocal, but Miriam discovered she loved motherhood despite the exhaustion. Marcus was an involved father, changing napkins and walking the floor with a fussy baby at all hours. He sang to Matthew, nonsense songs and old ballads, and the sound of his deep voice soothing their son filled Miriam with contentment. Rosa and Alina visited often, bringing food and baby gifts and advice. Mrs. Anderson came from town with a basket of supplies and news of the territory. Joseph carved a set of wooden animals as toys for when Matthew was older. As Matthew grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Marcus's reputation for training fine horses spread, and buyers came from as far as Santa Fe to purchase his stock. Miriam managed the business side, her head for figures and her Boston education serving them well. Together, they built something substantial and lasting. When Matthew was 2 years old, a second child arrived, a daughter they named Catherine after Marcus's first wife. Miriam had suggested it, knowing that love did not diminish by being shared, and Marcus had wept at the gesture. Catherine was quieter than her brother, with Miriam's gray eyes and a thoughtful disposition. The years unfolded in a pattern of seasons and growth. Matthew grew into a sturdy boy who loved the horses as much as his father did. Catherine proved to have her mother's love of books and learning. When she was 5, a third child arrived, another son they named Thomas, who was stubborn and independent from his first breath. Miriam watched her children grow with wonder, amazed that she had helped create these unique individuals. She taught them to read using Marcus's extensive library. Marcus taught them to ride and care for the animals. Joseph and Alina were honorary aunt and uncle, teaching the children about the land and its original people, passing on knowledge that reached back generations. The ranch expanded over the years, adding more cattle and horses, employing additional hands during busy seasons. But it never grew so large that it lost its character as a family operation, a place where hard work and mutual respect were the foundation of everything. Miriam never forgot those first moments of arriving in New Mexico, expecting cruelty and finding instead a welcome home. She told the story to her children as they grew, wanting them to understand that their parents' love was built on respect and equality, on two people choosing each other and building something together. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Marcus gave her a gift, a leather-bound journal with her name embossed in gold. "For your thoughts," he said. "You have lived an extraordinary life, Miriam. Someone should record it." "Our life," she corrected. "We have built this together." "Even so," Marcus said, "your perspective is valuable. Write it down so our grandchildren will know the story." So Miriam began to write, recording not just the major events but the small moments that made up a life. The first time she successfully trained a horse alone. The night Matthew took his first steps. The morning she woke to find Marcus had picked wildflowers and left them on her pillow. The years of drought and the years of plenty. The challenges overcome and the joys celebrated. She wrote about arriving in Aztec, expecting to be treated as property and finding instead a man who greeted her as his equal. She wrote about learning to love a land that seemed harsh and unforgiving at first, but revealed its beauty slowly to those patient enough to look. She wrote about building a family and a legacy in a place that was still wild enough to reward courage and adaptability. The children grew into adults, each following their own path, but always connected to the ranch and the values they had been raised with. Matthew took over the horse training operation, developing an even greater reputation than his father. Catherine went to university in the East, but returned with new ideas about sustainable ranching that she implemented alongside her brother. Thomas, true to his independent nature, became a territorial lawman but visited frequently, always bringing stories of his adventures. As Miriam and Marcus aged, they handed over more responsibility to their children but remained active in ranch life. They still rode together in the mornings when their bodies allowed, watching the sun rise over land they had shaped, and that had shaped them in return. On their 30th anniversary, their children organized a celebration, inviting everyone from miles around. The party lasted all day, with food and music and endless storytelling. Miriam looked around at the crowd, people of different backgrounds and cultures who had come together in this corner of New Mexico to build communities and lives, and felt profound gratitude. That evening, as guests departed and the ranch settled into quietness, Miriam and Marcus sat on their porch, the same spot where they had spent countless evenings over the decades. Her hand rested in his, their fingers interlaced with the comfort of long familiarity. "You ever regret it?" Marcus asked quietly. "Leaving Boston, taking such a risk?" "Never," Miriam said without hesitation. "Every day I am grateful I was brave enough to answer your advertisement, grateful you were kind enough to welcome me as an equal rather than a servant." "I got the better end of that bargain," Marcus said. "You took a broken man who thought his life was over and gave him reason to believe in the future again. You gave me love and partnership and a family I never dreamed I could have." "We gave each other those things," Miriam corrected gently. "That is what partnership means, building something together that neither could have created alone." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the familiar sounds of the New Mexico night. Coyotes sang in the distance, just as they had on Miriam's first night 30 years ago. The wind whispered through the cottonwoods Marcus had planted when Matthew was born. Inside, they could hear their children and grandchildren talking and laughing, the sounds of family filling the home that had once been so lonely. "I love you, Miriam Reid," Marcus said, lifting her hand to press a kiss against her knuckles. "More today than when I married you, which I would not have thought possible." "I love you too," Miriam replied. "Thank you for giving me a home. Thank you for seeing me as your equal. Thank you for 30 years of partnership and love." As the stars emerged overhead, brilliant against the vast New Mexico sky, they remained on the porch, two people who had taken a risk on each other and built something lasting and beautiful. The ranch spread around them, testament to what mutual respect and shared labor could achieve. Their children carried forward the values they had instilled, ensuring the legacy would continue. Miriam thought about the frightened young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach 3 decades ago, braced for cruelty and expecting the worst. She wished she could tell that younger self that everything would work out better than she could imagine, that taking the risk would lead to happiness beyond her wildest dreams. But perhaps that younger Miriam had known somewhere deep inside, had felt the possibility even through her fear. Otherwise, she never would have boarded the stagecoach at all. She would not have traveled 17 days into the unknown to meet a stranger who promised nothing but honest work and fair treatment. That leap of faith had been the beginning of everything good in her life. And Marcus's decision to welcome her as an equal rather than a subordinate had set the foundation for a marriage that proved love and respect, were not opposing forces but complementary ones, each strengthening the other. As old age settled over them, their bodies growing slower but their minds remaining sharp, Miriam and Marcus adapted as they always had. They moved through the world together, supporting each other through the challenges that came with aging, celebrating each day they had together. Marcus developed arthritis in his hands, and Miriam learned to help him with tasks that had once been simple. Miriam's eyesight weakened, and Marcus read aloud to her each evening, returning the gift she had given him so many years ago. They needed each other in new ways, but remained fundamentally the partners they had always been. Their grandchildren grew, and then great-grandchildren arrived, babies who carried forward the blended legacy of Boston education and Western pragmatism, of Miriam's determination and Marcus's kindness. Each new generation added something to the family story, but the foundation remained the same: respect, equality, love freely given and received. On a spring morning much like the one when Matthew had been born, Marcus woke with pain in his chest. He knew immediately what it meant, had seen it happen to other men his age. He woke Miriam gently, not wanting to frighten her but needing her to understand. "I think this is it," he said quietly. "I am sorry, my love." Miriam's eyes filled with tears, but she did not fall apart. She had always been strong, and she would be strong now for both of them. She called for Matthew and Catherine, who both lived on the ranch with their families. She sent Thomas a telegram, though she knew he was too far away to arrive in time. She climbed back into bed and took Marcus into her arms, holding him as his breathing grew labored. "I am not ready to lose you," she whispered. "I know," Marcus said, his voice weak but steady. "But we have had 42 years, Miriam. 42 years of love and partnership and building something beautiful together. Not everyone gets that much time with their soulmate." "It is not enough," Miriam said, tears streaming down her face. "It never would have been," Marcus agreed. "I could have 100 years with you and still want more." He lifted his hand with effort, cupping her face. "But I am grateful for every day we had. You made me so happy, Miriam. You gave me a life worth living." "You did the same for me," Miriam said. "You welcomed me home when I had nowhere else to go. You treated me as your equal when the world told you I was less. You loved me for who I was, not who you wanted me to be." "That was easy," Marcus whispered. "Who you are is extraordinary." Their children came, gathering around the bed to say goodbye. Marcus spoke to each of them, offering final words of love and wisdom. He held his grandchildren's hands and told them to be kind, to work hard, to remember that people mattered more than property. As the sun climbed toward noon, filling the bedroom with golden light, Marcus's breathing changed. Miriam held him close, her tears falling onto his hair, and whispered all the love in her heart. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for 42 years of being my partner and my love. I will carry you in my heart until we meet again." Marcus smiled, his eyes on her face, and took his last breath in the arms of the woman he had welcomed home all those years ago. The grief was profound, but Miriam did not let it break her. She had learned from Marcus that strength and vulnerability were not opposites, that one could feel deep pain and still continue forward. She mourned him fully, supported by her children and the community they had built, but she also celebrated the extraordinary gift their years together had been. She continued writing in the journal Marcus had given her, recording not just her grief, but also her gratitude. She wrote about how a marriage built on equality and respect had given her a foundation strong enough to weather even this loss. She wrote about the legacy they had created together, not just in land and livestock, but in values passed to their children and grandchildren. She wrote about arriving in New Mexico, expecting cruelty, and finding love instead. about a cowboy who greeted her not as property but as his equal, and how those simple words had changed the trajectory of her entire life. Miriam lived another 8 years after Marcus's death, watching her great-grandchildren grow, helping to guide the ranch through changing times, and ensuring that the story of how she and Marcus built their life together was preserved for future generations. When her own time came, she went peacefully in her sleep, dreaming of a young cowboy with blue eyes who had once looked at her and seen not just a mail-order bride but a partner worth welcoming home. The ranch continued under Matthew's guidance, then his children's, each generation adding their own chapter to the ongoing story. But they never forgot the foundation on which everything was built. Two people who took a risk on each other, who chose partnership over power, who proved that love born from respect and equality could last a lifetime and beyond. Years later, when a great-great-granddaughter found Miriam's journals in the ranch house attic, she read them with wonder and brought them to the rest of the family. They gathered to hear the story of their ancestors, the tale of a woman who traveled west expecting nothing and a man who welcomed her as his equal. The journals became a family treasure, passed down through generations as a reminder that the best relationships are built not on dominance or submission but on mutual respect and shared labor. That love which grows slowly from partnership is often stronger than passion which burns hot and fast. That courage to take risks and grace to offer welcome can change not just individual lives but entire legacies. And in a small museum in Aztec, New Mexico, among artifacts from the territorial days, visitors can still see a wedding photograph from 1883. It shows a tall woman with intelligent eyes standing beside a rancher with a kind smile, their hands clasped between them, their expressions showing not just hope for the future but confidence in the partnership they had chosen. The caption reads, "Marcus and Miriam Reid, founders of the Reid Ranch." An example of equality and partnership in the American West. But those who know the full story understand it means so much more than that. It represents a woman who arrived expecting cruelty and found home instead. A man who chose to welcome a stranger as his equal rather than his subordinate. And 42 years of love, respect, and partnership that proved the best things in life are built together, brick by brick, day by day, with patience and care and unwavering commitment to seeing each other truly. Their story became legend in the small community around Aztec, told and retold with embellishments and variations, but always maintaining the essential truth, that Marcus Reid had been different from other men of his time, willing to share power and decision-making with his wife. That Miriam Hamilton had been brave enough to take a risk on an uncertain future. And that together, they had built something that lasted far beyond their own lifetimes. The ranch remained in the family for over a century, adapting to changing times but maintaining the core values Marcus and Miriam had established. During droughts and depressions, wars and social upheavals, the Reid family endured because they remembered the lessons their ancestors had taught. Work together, respect each other, treat people fairly, and build something lasting rather than chasing quick profits. In the end, the greatest legacy Marcus and Miriam left was not the land or the livestock, or even the successful business. It was the example of what marriage could be when both people approached it as equals, when respect and partnership were valued as highly as romantic love. They showed that practical considerations and deep affection were not incompatible, that arrangements made for sensible reasons could bloom into profound connection. Their story proved that the best journeys often begin with fear and uncertainty, but can lead to joy beyond imagining. That home is not always where you start, but sometimes where you choose to build. and that welcoming someone as your equal is the greatest gift you can offer, because it says, I see you, I value you, and I believe together we can create something neither of us could achieve alone. This was the truth that echoed down through generations of the Reid family, carried in stories and journals, and the very bones of the ranch house Marcus built and Miriam made into a home. A truth born on a hot afternoon in 1883, when a frightened young woman stepped off a stagecoach expecting the worst, and a lonely rancher chose kindness instead of cruelty, partnership instead of ownership, equality instead of dominance. "Welcome home, my equal," he had said, and with those words changed both their lives forever.